as the son of Abraham. That means that he came through a seed line, a progeny. He came right directly from the son of the son of the son of the son. That word of is a highly specific word, ek, E-K, all right? Now, that same word, ek, you can't fudge. I mean, if it's used one place, one way, it's used the same way. These prophets they weren't trying to confuse us, okay? In 1 John 3:11, it talks about Cain. He said that he don't be like Cain, who was of a descendant of the wicked one. Now, who do you think that's talking about? Okay? Mary, when Jesus was born, what was in her was of the Holy Spirit. Matthew, it says about Bethlehem, about Jesus being born in Bethlehem. I mean, it's Christmas. This is what we're talking about. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and out of Ek, out of the ancestral home of David. And I'll tell you that word Ek is so specific. It means from out or out from among, and it's suggesting from an interior outwards. The womb, the baby's in the womb, and then it's born outward into the world. That's exactly, and it's always used in all of the genealogies. Okay? So, now, one of the Hebrew idioms, like, okay, Abraham's seed. See, this is, I just say you can never really understand the Bible unless you understand this concept. And it has so been stolen from us. But it's because we are at a point in time where, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be again. This is genetic manipulation, infiltration, recombinant DNA that has been going on many times out in the open, but many times. This is the mystery of lawlessness. This is where you get your Antichrist. And we're coming to a point where the final Antichrist is about to be on the scene. This guy isn't going to appear out of nowhere. There is a history and a mystery of lawlessness. And I have to, and that's why so many people have a hard time figuring this out today. But listen, it's really very simple. I want to tell you something. All right, Abraham lived 350 years after the flood. Abraham was 60 years old when Noah died. Abraham's son, Noah's son Shem became the firstborn. In other words, he inherited what he really is, the spiritual blessing of the firstborn son. He kept alive through the generations the truth of God. That by this time, you had Nimrod on the scene. Nobody even knows who Nimrod was or what his whole history was about. They just wiped it off the books. They just kind of like blow past it. Everybody goes right to Abraham, and then you go right to Moses. Like 2,000 years of history didn't mean anything. Well, I'll tell you what. If you don't have that part of the storyline, you're never going to understand the ending. Now, so what I'm trying to say is they were a family. Noah, Shem, Abraham, they hang out together. If you read some of these other texts, Shem was, I think the word is tzadik. He had when you're a rabbi and you have 12 disciples and there's a word for it. But anyways, Shem was a preacher of righteousness, just like his father. Abraham knew. See, you got to see, this is really interesting history. Abraham's father was Nabor, who was a high occultic priest in the courts of Nimrod. Okay, so here's his dad, who's totally sold out now to the. Then he's got his grandfather and his uncle and some of the other people who are, having this little righteous thing going on here. And the story of Abraham is he was really torn between two worlds. He really just like, oh my gosh, where do I go? What do I do? And he had a personal crisis at one point. And he stepped before the Lord, and this is the story of Abraham. And he just said no. And there's just so much information in these books. I'm telling you, you have to read the book of Jasher. You have to read. And he finally said, no, my God is going to be the Lord. I'm going with the Shem side. I'm going with my grandfather Noah. That's going to be my God. And God finally said, hallelujah, welcome home, kid, okay? So that's where it all begins again, because then God does a whole new thing with Abraham. He found a man who was righteous on the earth and chose the true God, okay? Because God will never go against our free will. He doesn't make you. You have to choose. Abraham chose. And from then on, it gets really interesting, because then he says, okay, now I'm going to do something different with your seed. We're not going to, this one righteous line is not going to work. We're going to create I'm going to create progeny for you, Abraham, that's going to be like seed for you, the seed of Abraham. So Abraham's seed is a lot of times called, in idioms, Hebrew, Yah's seed. Yah is a word for God, God's seed, okay? I'm going to create a whole nation. He said, your seed is going to be like the sands of the ocean, sands of the sea, and the stars of heaven. And that's where we are today. The progeny of Abraham is all over the world. We're everywhere, okay? We have repopulated the earth. We are everywhere. But the problem is there has been another seed, another bloodline, tracking along all this time, which has been creating huge problems. And they're about to create their last problem, and then that's it. They're just going to get eradicated. They are the tares. I'm going to tell you what a tare is now, okay? Because Jesus, he knew exactly what he was saying. He knew exactly what he was saying. Okay, now weeds. Then it talks, so you got the seeds of God, and you've got the seeds of the wicked one, who are also called the tares, or the weeds. It says weeds, but it's really word tares. It's even more interesting, a word tares. Okay, now a tare. What is a tare? It's very interesting. One of the great principles, and this is why Solomon was considered the wisest man that ever lived. This is what Moses kind of understood, and that as above, so below. So in other words, the natural world kind of mirrors a lot of what's going on in the spiritual worlds, okay? Now, wheat, this is called darnel. It's called false wheat. There's another thing that grows. It's always grown. It started in Syria and kind of the Mideast. It's now global. It's called a false wheat. You can call it darnel, whatever. And a lot of times you cannot tell the difference of this ryegrass that's growing as opposed to the true wheat that's growing. And you can't really tell into the ears or the fruit until it's budded, till all the fruit's out, okay? And then it appears, and I have to tell you what's really interesting about the tares, and the only way you can really tell them, when they're in full bud, you can really kind of tell. You can tell the difference in the buds. They're very different. But one thing that's really telling, and this is why it's going to be really easy for the angels, is the tares kind of stay straight up, okay? The wheat, when it's in full harvest, because they're so heavy, their buds, they fall over. But the tares stand straight up. So it's much easier to just go through and just kind of pull up everything that's standing up, right? But think of that for a second. Every knee shall bow. I mean, hey, we're already bowing. I'm like bowing before the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's like, this is God's thing. I'm not going to mess. But the tares, they're very prideful. They're haughty. They just don't get it. They're like going to, And so they're not going to be bowing at the end. Everybody else is going to be waiting for the King of Glory to come, and they're still going to be standing straight up. It's really kind of funny. Anyways, they remain, they're still going to be shaking their fist at God. But be that as it may. Okay, one of the things that it produces, and this is why the prophets, they knew all this, that this stuff grew, they would take from nature and they would allegorize it, okay? This is a very toxic plant. I mean, it's poisonous, and it will poison men and livestock. So that's why you don't really want to mess with it, okay? But the more interesting thing is about this, these tares, it isn't the tare itself, it's not the plant itself that is toxic. And it is like a fungus. It is a fungus that has attached itself, and that is growing as an organism inside of itself. Now, is that not saying something? Oh my gosh. Okay? So it says that an enemy had done it. Jesus said, forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they do. This is the whole analogy. People, if you open yourself up to a foreign something to come in and possess you and work, you better be careful, because you might have one of these fungi, okay? This fungus that is in the denel, the false wheat, okay? Now, Paul said, and this is where you can know that in the Old Testament, and I'm really tired of this because we need a healing revival. Healing is the children's bread. It's our inheritance, okay? People use this thing, the Paul's thorn in the flesh, as, Paul he had bad eyesight, so, he was really suffering physically for something. No. Okay, if you study back in the Old Testament, if you go back and study and get a grip on these things, Paul had a thorn in the flesh. That is an Old Testament, borrowed from the Old Testament. Paul knew exactly what he was saying, of what thorns, briars, tares, okay? In Psalms, well, anyways, I just want to tell you, go back to what this fungus that grows inside the darnel plant will do. It will cause us, the symptoms will make you look like you're drunk, like drunkenness, okay? So what will happen is you begin, you have impaired speech. You're trembling, you have poor vision, you start to stagger. Now, how many times have you heard the prophets talk about this kind of behavior? They're staggering, their prophets are drunk with wine. They have no vision. He's talking about what happens when these tares live among you and they get the upper hand. Okay, so in Psalm 6:7 it says that his eye is consumed. This is, I don't know who wrote this song, maybe David or whatever. His eye is consumed, his vision blurred. My vision is blurred by grief. My eyes are worn out because of all my enemies, my foes, my adversaries, way it's translated. Now, this word thorn in the Old Testament is specifically used for a group of people called the Canaanites who were constantly dogging Israel. And they were told over and over in Joshua 23:13, he says, these Canaanites will be snares and traps to you. They will be whips on your back. They will be thorns in your eyes. People who and it says again, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. I don't think I've really made my point clear yet about who I think the tares are and where they came from. But maybe I'll wrap up like that. So if you just stick with me. But I want you to understand something, that we are talking about people groups. Again, it says in Judges, in verses 2-3, it says again and again, they will be thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a snare to you. These people who are worshiping other gods, who keep introducing the other gods, the worship of the pagans, okay. So, and there's one more. Oh, in Numbers, says again in Numbers 33:55 about the inhabitants. Moses and Joshua were very clear to the people. Once you clear the land, and you better clear the land of these people, and you better not intermarry with them, and you better not take on their gods, and you better not start practicing the way they practice. Why? Because they're tares, and they will take away your eyesight. In other words, and this is you won't be able to see spiritually correctly. You'll lose your revelation knowledge, and you'll start worshiping like that. You'll get all confused and mixed up, and then pretty soon you will become totally disobedient to me. And that's what happened, okay? Now, in Genesis, it talks about Genesis 3:15. It's the first usage in the Old Testament, which is the word zera. The New Testament word for seed, sperma, sperm. In people, we're talking about DNA. In the Old Testament, it's the word zera. Same thing. And it means, again, it's to scatter, to sow. When you sow seed. And if you really read these Old Testament, they're very specific. Sometimes I really laugh because these prophets were very... I guess if we really understood the lingo, they didn't mince their words. They were very graphically telling it like it is. But we don't get it today because one of the great things the enemy loves to do, he loves to make words have their meaning change through time. So 500 years after the fact, you have no clue. You're so far from the mark of what it originally meant. You have to go back to the original source. You have to look up every word in its Hebrew and Greek, people. That's what we were told, to be Berean, to check everything. Anyways, so it's the word Zerah. It means, again, offspring. One of the first uses, and it started in Genesis. It started when God created, and on the fourth day, when he created living souls. Genesis 1 is loaded with apocryphal understanding. And I can't wait to do a whole session on that. But he did say that, he said, then God said the land produced vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees that bear fruit with seed in it according to their various kinds. And what he said was everything in God's ordered system is to reproduce after its kind. Now, I'm telling you what, that is one of the first laws, and that was for the whole universe, not just the Adam. Everybody, everything, living soul, was supposed to reproduce only with its kind. Now, did that happen? Not at all. Recombinant DNA has been a problem from the get-go. Oh. But especially with Adam and Eve. The seed of the woman, it says in Genesis 3:15, Adam was told, there were 2 trees in the garden. You do not eat. And I'm going to unpack all those words. From the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because you do. But they did. Okay. And they had 2 kids right off the get-go, Cain and Abel. Well, what happened? All right. This is the apocryphal understanding. Because, God is not mean. People, we don't understand. He is a just judge. He's a just judge. This thing is playing out. And it's taken so long. Because when it's all wrapped up, no one, nothing in all creation will be able to stand before their maker and say, you never told me, or whatever. Didn't give me enough chances. Oh, I didn't have enough, whatever. He is a just judge. And he's a merciful God. And this is why, okay, I have Genesis 3:15. It says, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, that there will be enmity, which means hatred, between these 2 races. I'm telling you, people, it started in the garden. Most people understand Genesis 6 today with the Watchers, the incursion into the genetics of mankind by these spiritual angels. It happened in the garden. Satan did it the first time in the garden with, all right, now, it's almost like Clue, like, just, in the garden with the serpent, okay? There was a genetic, and I don't really want to unpack that this time, but there became a race of people from Cain called the Canaanites who lived pre-flood. And their father was the serpent, and their mother was Eve. And you got 23 chromosomes of one, and you got 23 chromosomes of the other, and they make the 46 chromosomes that make up the human zygote, okay? Cain, and then Adam and Eve came together, and they had Abel. And you had now 2 bloodlines, 2 fathers, 2 kids, 1 mother. Houston, we really have a problem. Oh my gosh. But I will tell you something. This is why the tares, Cain had a 50-50 chance of staying on the straight and narrow. I don't care who your daddy is. You got God as a father. You can walk the walk, and if you want, it is yours. And I'll tell you what, those prophets say it. You read Ezra, you read Baruch, they are very clear. No one, you cannot blame the sins of your fathers for your fate. Cain had a 50-50 chance of saying to God, okay, fine, just tell me what to do, I'll do it. And with your help, I can do this thing. I cannot listen to that side of the family. I can listen to you, and I can, did he? Did he? No. He murdered his brother. He was of, and Jesus said he's of his father. He chose He had a 50-50 chance. He was of his father, but he had Eve's DNA in him too, and he could have walked the walk, but he chose not to. Oh well. But this is what makes what Jesus did for us the most unbelievable thing. And if I cannot understand today with this understanding and how DNA works, if people do not choose Jesus Christ. Because I'll tell you what, there is no other name, there is no other ticket out of here. We have been born corruptible from the get-go. That's what iniquity is. Death entered the human race at that point. It couldn't be stopped. We are all going to die because of this, because what our DNA got. But I'll tell you what, this is what Jesus said. If you get born again, he's saying, of incorruptible seed, God is willing to put back into us an incorruptible DNA that will not die if we will choose him. Now, if that isn't good news, or if you want to stick with your recombinant DNA and we are all one big mess at this point, it's going to die. And if you die, it's appointed man once to die, and then the judgment. And this is why it is so important to understand and to test your spirits and that why was Jesus to come in the flesh? Because he is coming to save those of the Adamic race. Because we are the top of the food chain. And you get back to that. And it says the whole creation groaneth and travaileth until the manifestation of the sons of God. It says that everything fell into corruption because of that one act of disobedience in this, what was this epoch, this age, this this time we're living in, these 6,000 years. But Jesus came, that's what he told, this is what he told Adam, this is what they understood and knew, that a Messiah was going to come, someone was going to come through their DNA. That's why he always said, don't intermarry. It has to do with me like other people aren't good enough. He needed to keep a pure bloodline going until he came. And he did, okay, and he came. And because, and his own people didn't even recognize him for who he was, because they had become, it had been so stolen, they'd become so asleep and so blind by just the tares and just living like the tares and just letting anybody in and just lead them. Oh, you got the truth, I'll follow you. You got the truth, I'll follow you. Whatever. This is so important to understand. This new birth that Jesus has offered, because at the end of the age, the gig is up. This is the point. Satan had a limited time. Jesus is coming. It's called when the trumpet sounds, the last Jubilee. This is why I hope my husband will do a teaching on the Jubilees. Jubilee is like when everything has to go back to its original owner. The gig is up. Satan is no longer the God of this world. It's done. His judgment is sealed. First one in the lake of fire. And then all those who want to, what can I say? God is so good, and then he will change us. Do you know that DNA, that seed, that deposit, that incorruptible seed that is in us, that's the mystery the church understood in the beginning. And it says that if you will let it abide in you and you abide in it, it will change you 100% from the inside out. And you will no longer sin. The two natures that Paul always taught, the carnal man and the spiritual man. Choose to be a spiritual man. Choose to live forever in the way when this thing is all cleansed up and recreated by God. So you know what? That's my Christmas present to everybody. I mean, I'm telling you what. If you could just wrap your mind and not let it offend you. I'm sorry if I didn't write the book. I wasn't the one who sealed all this information up. It's there. I have so many texts I can show it to you, line upon line, precept upon precept. But it's going to happen again. That's what the mark of the beast is. If you think that by changing your DNA again to whatever, because it says even the elect will be saved, and becoming something that God did not create you to be, that's going to solve everything. Maybe we'll begin next session with that understanding. So I hope, and I hope you listen to this 3 or 4 times so you really kind of understand it. I talk very fast and I get very excited, but that's beside the point. The information is important. So Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you. In Jesus' name, amen.